I'm Kris Roberts. I am the managing partner at the Roberts Tax Group here in downtown Torrington. This week I wanted to talk to you about filing statuses. There are 5 filing statuses that an individual can select when filing their income tax return. Some of them are easy, some of them not so much. And your filing status is really based on what your situation is as of December 31st of that year. Doesn't matter what you did in January or March or July, it's what was your situation on December 31st. Now the first filing status is pretty simple. This is single. This is just an individual who's not married, doesn't have any children, it's just them. It could be a dependent child or it could just be a single person. Nice and easy. The second one, which is the second most common one, is married filing jointly. This is when you have 2 spouses. Doesn't matter whether they have children or not, doesn't really matter. And they file all their stuff together on one tax return and they file married filing jointly. Now the third one is married filing separately. This one gets a little bit more complicated because there's some special rules when you're doing your tax return if you're filing separately. But a lot of times married couples will pick married filing separately for other financial reasons, not necessarily tax reasons. And sometimes it's more beneficial that way. So you'll have married filing separately. Also, what you'll see with married filing separate is if you have 2 spouses who are going through a breakup or a divorce or something like that, where they'll file separately. Their divorce isn't final yet, so they're filing separately. A lot of times what will happen is we'll have clients come in who are in the process of going through a divorce and they want to file as single. However, they can't do that unless there's certain other things in place. If you have a legal separation from the court and your divorce isn't final, but you do have a legal separation, you can file married filing separately or single. So that starts getting into a lot of gray area and you have to look at each individual case. So if you're someone who's going through a divorce or a split from a spouse, you should reach out to a tax professional to make sure you're selecting the appropriate filing status. The next filing status is the 4th one, and we don't see it that often, and it's called qualifying widow or widower. And that is when you have a spouse whose spouse has passed away during the course of the year and there are dependent children. So let's just take a traditional family of a mom and a dad and they've got 2 kids. Let's say the mom passes away and then the dad is left with the children. He can qualify as a qualifying widower. Again, this doesn't happen too often, thank goodness, but it is there. So if you know somebody whose spouse has passed away during the course of the year, and they have children, then they're going to take a look at this qualifying widower. Now the 5th filing status, head of household. This is the one that gets messed up the most. Now to file head of household, the first rule is that the taxpayer has to be unmarried as of December 31st, okay? That's the first rule. You can't be separated or, living with your soon-to-be ex-husband or ex-wife or whatever. You have to be unmarried. And you have to have a dependent. And the problem is that our identification of a dependent is very different than what the IRS says is a dependent. You could be a single person and let's say you have your 30-year-old son living with you and he's not really working, but he's working a little bit, but you pay most of the bills, but not all of them. And you may feel that he is your dependent, but IRS rules would say that he's not. You have to prove that you pay at least 50% of the support for that dependent. Now, it gets a little trickier if you have a single person who's living in a blended family. Perhaps you're living with a boyfriend or a girlfriend and they have children, or maybe they're not their children, but their nieces or their nephews, or there could be a brother or a sister, and it starts to get a little bit more complicated. So if you're thinking that you qualify for head of household, you really should take a look at the research on the IRS website or reach out to a tax professional to make sure that you really do qualify for this filing status, because what will happen is the IRS will catch it if it's not right, and then no one wants that, because they're going to send you notices, you're going to end up owing money, and that's always a drag. So it's really important to make sure you get your filing status right. And if you think you're going to check that box that says head of household, make sure you look at all of the dependency tests that the IRS has listed on their website to make sure that that dependent really truly qualifies you for head of household. If you're unsure, you can always reach out to us at the Roberts Tax Group. You can find us online at www.rtg.tax, or you can find us on Facebook. And I want to thank everybody who's emailed me to come up with different topics to talk about, and this was one of the most popular ones. So I'm hoping that this helped you out. All right, take it easy, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.